Well, hello, friends, and thank you for joining me on the Daily Connection. It's a time when we get together in the Word, and more importantly, the Word gets into us. So today we're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9, and how that relates to the idea that we're never alone, and that coming within the framework of the Holy Spirit. So Paul says, "But as it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no human heart has conceived, God has prepared these things for those who love Him." So if we think about that in terms of its context, we know if you're looking at it through a study Bible or even in your own material, it should be in bold print or somehow set apart from the rest of the text. And that's a citation, which of course Paul sets it off by saying, "But it is written," or "as it is written," letting us know that he's quoting from a text. And this particular quote comes from Isaiah 64, verse 4. It's not verbatim exact, but it's close enough to know that that would be the text he's quoting here. And in that context, Israel has gone into bondage. They're looking for hope. And of course, they're thinking of hope in terms of a human deliverer, but God has prepared something that no man had seen, no ear had heard, no one could conceive it. God alone had prepared it, and God alone would carry it out. And that really goes hand in hand with the idea of the Holy Spirit. We know the Holy Spirit, when he came, was a bit of a mystery in terms of what was going on because of what we see in Acts chapter 2. Here's Peter and the apostles, the day of Pentecost. People are gathered together for worship in the temple, and then suddenly something happens to the point where a phenomenon of hearing takes place. We oftentimes say it as a phenomenon of speech, but maybe it's one and the same, but they said we're hearing them in our language. We hear each of these different people groups in our own language. So that to me speaks of a phenomenon of hearing. But it's not so much the what as it is the how and the who. In this case, it says they were astounded and perplexed because they didn't know what this meant. And Peter went on to explain that this was what was quoted by or pronounced by or prophesied by the prophet Joel, and this is what was taking place, and that was nothing less than the very Spirit of God being unleashed on these people to where that would confirm who Jesus is. In other words, this was not just something that happened, it was a part of God's divine plan in the first place. And that takes us back to something that Jesus said in John's Gospel, starting early, right after that time, his discussion about him departing, him leaving his peace, and that they shouldn't worry. He says this: "If you love me, you'll keep my commands. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another counselor to be with you forever. He is the Spirit of truth. The world isn't able to receive him because it doesn't see him or know him, but you do know him because he remains with you and will be in you." So yet again, we see that what's coming to the disciples is not coming through a world system. It's not coming as a result of worldly wisdom. It's not coming as a result of man's actions or activities. It is purely a divine, sovereign act of God, and it is the counselor, the Holy Spirit, who is coming. He says, you will receive him, he will be in you, and will be with you forever. And then he goes on later on in chapter 14 to say this, and I encourage you to read these later. Verse 25, "I have spoken these things to you while I remain with you, but the counselor, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything I have told you." So here we see the promise that through the Holy Spirit, what we don't understand biblically, he will help us to understand. What we need to recall biblically in relation to truth and in relation to the ministry of the gospel, he will help us to recall that. He did that for the apostles. He still does that even now. I dare say that in moments when we're engaging others in gospel conversations, it's the Holy Spirit that's first of all not only convicting them concerning sin and righteousness, but also counseling us and guiding us in how we engage this individual. He's empowering his message. As long as we're faithful to share the gospel, he will be faithful to empower that gospel. And it is by the Holy Spirit that we are then empowered to carry out the commission, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That is our evangelistic aspect. Teaching them to observe all I've commanded you. That is our disciple-making aspect. Helping them mature and grow in their faith. He says it right here. The counselor, he's going to send it. He will teach you all things. He will bring remembrance. He is our primary asset in carrying out the commission and in living out daily the call of God on our life, the ministry which he has purposed and presented to us and shaped and formed us to carry out. And so I hope today you understand from this week's lessons, and we're going to wrap this up tomorrow, that this ministry of the gospel, it was commissioned to us by Christ. It is being empowered in us by the Holy Spirit. We're not alone in this. This is not something that we do by pure natural talent and ability, although some people, I will say, are gifted in a sense with a charisma of sorts, an ability just to talk to people naturally. They do seem to have a little bit of advantage, but we all have the advantage in that the Holy Spirit has been given to us. What no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what is not of man but of God purely in his divine sovereign plan is the Holy Spirit given to us, so that not only are we never alone, but we will always be empowered as long as we're living in submission to and surrender to the will of God and seeking to honor him daily. We will be empowered for his ministry, which means that I can wake up every day with the assurance that knowing that when I head out that door, I am to live sent.